All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Data Gods Book Club. We're going to be going over The Effective Data Storytelling by Brent Dykes. We're going to be talking about that with a group of professionals in the industry. I am super excited about this. Week one was amazing, where we got to go in and learn more about working with data and analytics. It was great. We covered chapters 1 and 2. Last week, I came down with the flu. So, you didn't want to see me on the live stream. That would have been a bad thing. We're excited to be back. We're going to be doing chapter 3 and chapter 4 this week. And we're going to be talking about this. We're going to be going through how we can use this and just going over some general concepts inside the book. If you haven't purchased the book yet, go out to Amazon, pick that guy up and, join in on the fun. These are recorded. They're available on my channel, so you can come back, rewatch them, go over what we're talking about and see if any of this stuff makes sense to you. But enough of that stuff. Let's get on over to the crew. Alliance is counting on you. Like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, turn on that alarm bell so you don't miss any future mission. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Yes. Hey, Kevin, Mike, Jessica, Greg. Thank you guys so much for joining this week. We're super excited to have you guys on. This week was chapters 3 and chapters 4. We went in and chapter 3 is the psychology of data. Chapter 4, the anatomy of data storytelling. Frankly, I am super excited that we got to do chapter 4, especially after some of the announcements at Build yesterday, because they play so tightly in with what we've got going. In fact, I changed up my little bit of a demonstration and the content that I was going to be going over on chapter 4 accordingly. So, if you're not familiar with this book, you can go out, you can get this on Amazon. It's available. This is a discussion guide that he's got out on his website. I have a print slide somewhere with this. I lost his website. He's got a great website. effectivedatastorytelling.com. So as we go through this, please, everyone who's on the team's channel, I want to hear from you guys. Like, that's the whole point of this, right? It's not just Chris talking. I want to hear from each and every one of you. So raise your hand when we get to something. We're run through and we want to hear about your input. So this interaction is what makes this so incredibly valuable. If you're not on the live stream and you're on YouTube right now, leave a comment, start that conversation, get that up and running so that we can all be working together as a community. It's how we interact and work together that really makes this such a special thing. So, thank you guys so much. I hope you've had a chance to read chapter 3. I thought this was an incredible chapter. I love that the key topic here was that logic and emotion is key in making a decision, right? Like, these things will pull us one way or another. We'll see an insight that will often counter the way we look and think about the world. And that insight can be really hard for us to adjust and take on and accept. So I thought that was absolutely fabulous. Any other big items that you guys, what was your number one takeaway from the book? We'll start with Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Glad you're feeling better. Yeah, the two systems for decision making is one that really hit home for me, and my clients, my team kind of hear me quite a bit, right? I'm always preaching, and yes, that is the right word. I want us to make conscious decisions. I don't want us to just kind of take something in and subconsciously say, or all of a sudden, that's what we're doing just because our first system just kind of subconsciously said, yes, this is what we should be doing. So how much it takes to move from, what he in the book called, the two systems in decision making. The first one that you kind of train and it's automatic for, which is great in, skill survival or professions, like firemen, policemen and stuff like that. They want to train that way. But in our thought leadership and our analytical thinking type of way. We should always be looking at how do we get to the second system so that we're analyzing and we're making conscious decisions. That was the big one for me.
Yeah, I really like that one. I love this this illustration that they have here, the whole Spock, McCoy, Kirk. We can all relate to that, right? Like, coming in and being all logic and I've brought in data, I've got my spreadsheets, doesn't necessarily speak to the heart of the matter, right? I think that's, having that emotion, having that empathy for the the people that you're working with, and be able to combine and mix those together, and come up with a decision based upon both sides of that, I think is super valuable.
Yeah, and didn't he have real close to this? And I probably opened my book. That was it, to where it seems like system one is always the original default, right? So it's thinking about how to get past system one and into system two. Because they both still play an important role, and he has, he'll have this later on in the chapter, right? But you're going to hit the logic part, and you got to get through some of that. Sometimes it is just a logic part of presenting the facts. So, yes, thanks for showing that.
Yeah, I think that's great. All right, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And again, welcome back to say what Kevin said. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so to go along with the systems here, I think one of the things that stood out to me was the bat and ball example that they had, that basically said, if you have a bat and ball, collectively they cost $1.10, so how much does the ball cost? So, just your automatic response, my automatic response is, well, it cost $1, but that's really not, it cost, so how much did the bat cost, right? So I said, oh, it's $1, but that's basically kind of everyone's first reaction is, that it kind of goes with that first system one. And my daughter, I actually played that trick on her this week. I asked her, I said, so here's an example, so how much do you think this costs? And she actually got it wrong, but then she drew a picture of how it kind of helped explain how you get it right. And I wish I had it with me, but it was a really good example of an illustration of how you actually could kind of think about it and understand, the difference between the two. But that's a really good example of the difference between system one and system two. Is system one, you just kind of instinctively think about, kind of your first reaction is that first amount, which was like $1, but no, it's not right. That it costs more than that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, I like that. Jessica?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Sorry, just one more quick thing. So
yeah,
the other thing that I got out of this was and maybe you're going to get into this a little bit further, but the doctor, about the hand washing techniques, about how that cut down on mortality rates. So that's a good example of just presenting the facts and thinking that's good enough, but not really, kind of going and carrying that forward with better examples of, how you can kind of explain things and why his findings were important. So anyway, I'll stop talking.
No, yeah, you're spot on, and you actually lead into the little demo thing I put together. I'm gonna hit that, and then we'll head over to Jessica. And if you have a question or comments or thoughts on this topic, please raise your hand. We want to hear from you guys. But you know me, I like to work with data. So I always go to data to start working on stuff, right? So last week we talked about the BS line, about like how you could drill in to see the details to find an insight. This week, as Mike was talking about, there was that issue with hand washing where just doctors didn't realize how impactful hand washing could be, and just the numbers alone didn't shift their way of thinking, and that caused the deaths of millions of people, right? And the big thing that they came from that is you need to be able to combine not just your facts, but you need to visualize it, and you need to have a narrative around it, and you need to make an emotional connection. And I thought, like, holy cow, that kind of is something that you could really do in how you present some of your information, right? So I kind of I brought that all together here, and I started to build out like, okay, what would my daily reseller gazette be like if I was thinking about like trying to convey those death rates, bring that information forward in a way that was appealing to the time, right? So I combine the KPIs, I combine the visuals, the details, as well as a narrative with visual, techniques inside of here, and the reality is this is just a background, that I've put in, right? I applied a very simple grayscale color scheme to this, right? So it was something that was relatively easy for me to do. It wasn't like I didn't have to break my back in order to get this in, but I'm able to kind of tell a convincing story as well as allow for that drill experience so that people can go in and call BS on stuff, or if something doesn't look right or doesn't feel right, you can make that happen, right? So that was my thought on like how could I take what I'm reading about and apply it to the tools and the techniques that that we're working on. And so Kevin or Mike, thank you so much for bringing that one up. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Sorry, and let's go over to Jessica. You had your hand raised as well.
Yeah. What was interesting to me was, we come just by the nature of what we do, we place so much weight and value on the data, on the fact. And what's really interesting to me about the book itself, and then I also put a reference in the team to something that coincidentally I read about completely independently, but just how much the facts don't matter if they disagree with your worldview. If for whatever reason you're not prepared to take on board whatever it is that's being presented as fact, you are quite capable of just saying that's not fact, and I am amazed, and I think we're living in that era right now. And I think it's really interesting that we all experience it as consumers, we experience it as members of the voting public, no matter where you sit, on the spectrum, but there is no fact we can all agree on. And I just think that's really interesting when you think about the fact that we have nothing but data. We're swimming in data. We're drowning in data. And yet facts have never been less important in some ways. So I just thought that was a really interesting. I mean, that's what happened to Semmelweis. I mean, he had the data, but it just wasn't, it contradicted their worldview. And, so it didn't matter that it was true. So anyway, it was a very interesting confirmation, I guess. And then it made me think about what things do I think about that I believe are facts that may not actually be factual, or that if somebody came to me and said, well, this and this and this is true, and I would say, no, it's not true because it contradicts my deeply held biases and beliefs. So right. I just thought it was it's an interesting topic overall. Yeah.
Learning how to reflect upon yourself and the way you look at the world is that can be really hard, right? Like what they call it, cognitive dissonance. That it can be painful to hold an opposing idea from what reality is, right? That cognitive dissonance, the further you are in your thought patterns from reality, it's painful, right? And that painful causes, pain makes people do bad things. They lash out irrationally, they respond poorly, just all sorts of bad things come from that. And that is really interesting, and honestly, that speaks to the storytelling and inside this chapter of the psychology of storytelling. It talks about like how do you broach these subjects, how do you bring people along inside of there, and actually we kind of even get into that more in the next chapter of our own storytelling and how to frame up the story to address some of those things. So, gosh, I gotta say, I am loving this book.
Yeah, and while you're on this page. I just want to acknowledge what Sheila put on the YouTube live stream.
Yeah.
right? And it's what you have highlighted here, how your brain could take 6 words, what's in those 3 bullet points there, and turn them into a story. So for those that have seen her comment on the live stream, this is exactly what she was talking about. And I was amazed when I went through it, probably just like you guys. And the exercise that's just before this, it's at the top, Mike was talking about. I hit into the same traps that I'm sure everybody did, or the same thing. So sorry to step on you, Greg.
Yeah, no, we'll go to Greg in just 1 second, but I do want to hit on specifically those 6 bullet points, because I did highlight those because I want to call them out. These 6 words tell a story, right? It's very easy to read them and feel an emotional connection with what it is, right? The first one, for sale, baby shoes never worn. Wow, it brings a shiver up your spine, right? Like it, and it's just 6 words, and it has such an impact on you, right?
Yeah, it could, right? Because it's the never worn because they were the wrong size or something worse, right?
Right.
And I think the way you're saying it, my mind kind of went that way at first as well. And then I had to reconvince myself there could be other reasons. Getting it through your system 1 to your system 2, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that is where the choice of the KPIs that we have in our report is so critical. These are our 6 words. These are the markers of any report that you're looking at that should tell a complete story when you choose them, right? You should be, if you're talking sales, it's how many calls did you make? How many meetings did you have? How many sales did you book? How many customer service events did you have, right? That type of lineage really speaks to the entire story of what it is for a sales cycle. And we can do that inside of our reports, and it can be simple, right? It doesn't have to be these crazy bells and whistles to get onto that stuff. So, all right, I apologize, Greg. Greg, why don't you come up? What was your favorite part, or what was your comment?
There we go. Trying to figure out how like the mind works does not work with my mind, but this was been interesting stuff. Like what Jessica was saying about just scrutinizing the facts that you disagree with. I mean, that's, on page 69, there's a number 1 and a number 5 in both tables, and trying to understand what the facts that you don't agree with, you totally look into them a little bit more or completely dismiss them quicker, either or.
Yeah.
But then, facts are, if you have a nice visualization to prove what that fact is, it's harder to just, dismiss it. So and having a good, a story with it may tweak your mind to believe it a little bit more. And then in the bottom part, with the stories, and it helps you understand it better, So it's interesting, and it's how that all works, trying to internalize it, how you look at things in every different aspect of life. And that the 6 words that you're just talking about, the 6 words that amazed me, that 6 words could do that much,
Right. And honestly, to that point, that what could Samwise have done differently? I highlighted here along those lines, right? Remember the poor woman behind the cold, faceless statistics, right? Like, instead of it saying like, mother mortality rate is 24.3% in AMs in the hospital, right? Like, instead of it reading it like that, tell a story about young Virginia, right? Young Virginia, who has 3 kids, works, to take care of the home and is helping out around the farm. And as their husband, Jeff goes out to the farm every day, and he's working to take care of his family and his parents. Young Virginia's pregnant, and it's such a blessed event. And Unfortunately, they don't know that she's going to go into the hospital, and 8 hours from now, she's going to be dead. And she's going to be dead because we didn't realize how important it was to wash our hands. Like, again, that sends shivers down your spine when you think of how you could frame that up and paint that picture for people on a story, right? And it doesn't have to be as dark as that, but that is an extreme example to give you how that can be humanized, right? Awesome. Kevin.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, considering the 6 words, kind of going back to that a little bit, you both, between Kevin and yourself, had 2 different stories you painted with that. And there's probably at least a third or 10 more, who knows? But, what did the author mean by that is the big deal. And being able to convey what they really meant in 6 words. If all we have is 6 words, and there's 6 numbers that are across the top of the report, if that's our only amount of story that we can use, then wow, we're might not be hitting the mark, right? They're going to see something else that the author didn't intend, So, but I had considerations of, we're told stories from day one, coming into this world, being told stories, but we're not told how to read a graph. For a long time, logically, how to get through, much less a Power BI report, or what was intended by that, So having to take classes to process logically versus just telling a story, and how much easier that is to understand. And yet, how much luxury do we have to actually print the entire story on the page? We don't.
And how often, are we thinking we're delivering a story, but all we're dealing is that information, and who knows if the appropriate message is being taken in? The absolute first data report I ever culled through a data warehouse to gather information to put together into a report. I sent it out. I was very happy. Like, it's supposed to take 2 weeks. I got it done in just like a couple days. I'm like, yay, I did it right. And the business user got it. He looked over and went, this is fantastic. And he took it and he went away, and I went on with my own business. And I did a follow-up a few weeks later, like, hey, is that report working for you? How did that go? Was that useful? He said, yep, we fired everyone on your list. Thank you for that. Like, oh my God, what are you doing? Oh, well, we thought that was behaviors of people that, would mean that they were doing something bad for the company. So we wanted to get that information. We fired them all. I'm like, holy cow, that like that was not, like, if you look into the stuff, that didn't mean that. You should not have done that. And it was awful. Like, that was horrible, right? But that speaks to the weight and the gravitas of, the stories or lack of stories that we deliver, right? It has real world implications. It has real world impacts on people's lives, and while going through that, I'm sure many of those people deserve to be fired because that was some shady stuff that was going on there. I'm sure some of them were not, and that haunts me 20 years later. So,
wow. So at first I thought he was messing with you when you said that, but it shows the true gravity of it, and not being able to, like what Kevin said, that being able to have further explanation with it. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that you're spot on, Kevin. Uma.
Yeah, so the most favorite part of mine in this chapter 3 was data stories, the breach, logic and emotions. So it's on page 92. A story is a fact wrapped in an emotion that compels us to take an action that transform our world. So it is like something which tells us that humans are fact-driven people, not fact-driven people. They are. We have to wrap our facts with the emotions, and it also is, if we understood the Semmelweis story, he would have saved more lives just wrapping the simple facts into some stories. and we have covered that into the last part of the chapter, that what he have done differently to save many lives. So yeah, as you said, we have to understood the gravitas.
Yeah, and honestly, one of the reasons I've stayed out of healthcare is because I don't want to do something that kills a whole bunch of people, right? One way or the other. I mean, I suppose you could save a whole bunch of people too, but I've purposely avoided that entire sector because of that, because it scares the bejesus out of me.
Yeah.
Right? That is so true. Excellent. Thank you, Uma. Great
Welcome.
call out. Yeah. Sean.
Hey, Chris. So something that I kind of just wanted to comment on was one of the cognitive aspects of this. So this is actually the neural linking.
Yeah.
And I thought that was absolutely just fascinating. The idea that you could actually not only produce a certain brain activity in that of the storyteller and to have that influence the brain activity of the listener, but to actually mirror that
Yeah.
was really crazy, because, you know, this whole book, effective data storytelling, being able to enact change, that's the big thing. And how do you ultimately make change happen if we just have been talking about the fact that there is resistance, there are individuals who believe something different, and they will actually fight even harder against a given idea if, for example, it contradicts their current beliefs. So the idea that with a story, you can actually kind of circumvent that entire process, that you can basically kind of like sneak in the back door to basically show them exactly what you're thinking and allow them to think like you're thinking. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
So, hey, Sean, since he made Star Trek references earlier, when you read this section, did you also think of Spock's mind meld technique of grabbing into the brain?
I haven't actually watched a ton of Star Trek, so.
Oh, okay. I'm dating myself. Sorry, I'll go back on mute.
I thought I thought of that, Kevin. It wasn't just you. So I thought the exact same thing. So yeah, it was a good analogy.
Yeah, I just saw this line right here. Essentially, we hear statistics, but we feel stories. And something, Sean, that you said struck something or dawned on me. Like, when we tell a story, or when we hear a story, I don't know about you, but I put myself in that lead character's place, right? Like, you know, like, okay, if I'm telling the story about Virginia who's going in with okay, I'm Virginia in that situation, right? You know, I'm going in and I'm about to give birth, right? Like, you feel for that person, you take that person's place in the story, and that's a great mechanism to get people out of their own heads and out of their own biases and out of their own, you know, mental state, and to get them into someone else's position, right? And run through and show it from that side. Sean, that's a great insight. Good call on your side.
Just to add on one tiny
Yeah.
little thing, with that hearing statistics and feeling stories, and how Brent Dykes actually explained that is really cool, because I actually took cognitive psychology, and this idea that, you know, with facts, we're activating Wernicke and Broca's area. So that's language production and language comprehension.
Mhm.
But with a story, you're actually, and this goes for a lot of things within a story, like you were saying, you put yourself in the character's shoes. So it's actually, you're activating the motor cortex when the word run appears. It's like all sorts of these different areas, whether it's talking about seeing something or smelling something, the somatosensory cortex, and all of these different areas of the brain are being activated and actually are kind of treating it as though you're experiencing those things, literally, that you're in. It's like a dream almost.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, that is just incredible. Yeah, yes. And that speaks to the type of language and verbiage we should use when we present our data stories too, right? We should be using, action statements. We should be using, like, we raced towards the end of the quarter, achieving whatever, right? Like, that gets people, that tells a story and brings that emotion and activates that in their brain. Oh, that's smart. Excellent, Sean. Thank you so much. And now I know who JP is. Hey, Janet.
Hey there, Chris. So I just wanted to comment on one of the things that has just really stuck with me in this first of the two chapters that we were going over. It was with the warehouse fire scenario where the original information was that, somebody left volatile materials in a closet. Okay, that's what caused this whole thing. It was the misinformation going on. And what really struck me was, oh wait, this turns out that wasn't true. But unless you help your audience to get to another plausible story using your data, they're still going to go back to the old story. Even if we say, okay, oh, guess what? There wasn't anything in the closet. Okay, fine. Well, I still think that they were being irresponsible and they were still the cause of it, right? So it's being cognizant that sometimes even if you are just correcting data, you really have to make sure that you are giving them kind of the lead to where you want them to go to as an alternative. Otherwise, they'll just go back to the same story.
Oh, that's a great piece of it. And honestly, that probably talks to like how we have to continue to keep digging sometimes. If we don't have the causal, right, and we just have some stuff that leads to it, like we haven't found root cause, right? We have to keep digging into that. That is fantastic.
Yeah, because you can say, well, I know this is wrong.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. So what? I'm going to stick with my story,
Right, right. What does that do for me, right?
Yeah. So until you can show me that there's, well, what's my alternative, and what pieces of data do we have that can help us get to that alternative? That's when you're making those connections.
Yeah, Chris, I think is it the next page where he's got the illustration with the puzzle pieces.
There. This one?
No, this is this. No, he had I'll see if I can find a page, but in along with that story, that's it right there, right? Yep. And so I related this warehouse fire to this, to where you have the misinformation, but how you have to build in order to put in that new insight, that new fact. You see in the blue, they had to build a whole new narrative around it, right? And what I took, what Janet was talking about, right, was if you put a story out there too early and it has the wrong information, you got to build an even better story to replace that, because it's so hard to, when somebody first anchors on something, even though it's incorrect, to get them to understand that this is the true new narrative, and you have to build the bigger, you can't just substitute the fact, you have to substitute in the whole narrative around it. Did you get that, Janet, too?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic, right? This fact doesn't fit in here, right? You try to cram it in, it's going to cause all sorts of mental issues, and people are going to reject it, right? Oh, yeah, that's a great, excellent
insight. It's kind of like goes back to water cooler talk, right? You might have just a couple of details here and there, a couple of facts, and then people will just go and run with them. And if there's not anybody filling the vacuum, people will fill it themselves. And most of the time, it's probably going to be something that's not fully accurate. So.
Well, and how important that is with all this, again, all the stuff we have going on online and whatnot, right? We're constantly being asked to evaluate and either potentially cram in a real fact amongst all the garbage that's in our brain, or discern, hang on, is what's being introduced, is this really true and I'm filled with garbage, or is it wrong and I'm not, right? And that can be hard. Oh yeah, that's great. Thank you, Janet. Excellent. And we'll finish with Jessica before we head on over to chapter 4. Jessica?
Yeah, and my thinking, this thought doesn't have anything per se to do with this chapter or the next chapter, but one of the things, or just in general, one of the things that I'm thinking about as we read through this is we keep talking about it as if the person who's developing the report is the same person who's going to be presenting the report, is also the person who has the standing and the credibility to, weave a story. And I just don't know that that's always the case. And I guess I'm not making that comment to say that, I'm just observing it and thinking about it, because I just think that sometimes creating that narrative and that story is not something that the analyst is going to get a chance to do. And, maybe they're preparing it for their boss, who is then going to go take that data and present it to the higher ups. And it just introduces a level of intermediary in a way that I'm just thinking about it, because I just think that some of the things that this guy says, you're not going to have the standing to be able to get up in front of, the CEO and craft that, and tell your story, so to speak. It's not your story to tell. So I just don't think a lot of companies have recognized and pushed data, quote unquote, ownership and data agency, such that if I'm a mid-grade business analyst, that I'm going to be recognized as somebody who's got the chops or the title to do that storytelling, is, I guess. And it's not a direct comment on this. What?
Even the access, right? Like, how often do you meet with the CFO of your company? If you're in a large company, that's like never, right? Like, you laugh because you saw him that one time walking down the hallway, right? Like, oh, there she is, right? That's the new CFO. Like,
right.
That's about your contact with them, right? How do you, as that mid-level analyst, have an ability to actually approach them in a way that would make sense?
It reminds me of a story, and then I'll shut up. But you just triggered a story. I was a brand new telecommunications analyst for a hair care company in Chicago. I think I was 26 years old, and I had been asked to put together. They wanted to buy a new system to record, to take the telephone data and be able to spit out reports so that we could do chargebacks and stuff. So very basic, early on reporting type of stuff. And so I did all this research and I wrote up this long paper, whatever. It was, a capital expenditure request. And I'll never forget the CFO call. And it was a small company. It was a family held business, but, it was a big business, but he called me up to the top floor and he said, I want you to tell me this story. I want you to tell me why you believe we should get this. And that's when he agreed to do it, was when I could stand in front of him and put into words, hey, this is why I think we ought to do it. But most companies, you'd never get that kind of access. You'd never get that audience. You'd never get that privilege and the respect that he showed me. Do you know what I mean? To tell that story.
Yeah.
So
and Jessica, I think, sorry, Chris, you're hitting right into what I think is in chapter 4 under the section called Every Data Story Needs a Storyteller. And then there are bullets that he had, and the last bullet is adding credibility. And I think that's where that falls in, because I had the exact same thoughts reading through that, of going, even today, I don't always have access to the right people. So I got to get my story through to somebody else that has the credibility to state it. I think you're spot on.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and just one thing to add to that. Just so I think it also depends on I guess where you are in the organization. If you're working like on a central BI team, you're developing, reports and solutions, applications for people within the business, and then they take what you develop for them and then they go present that story. So if you're kind of sitting in like a central team, you don't have the ability to kind of go pitch these things or talk to these things to the end users themselves. You're working with somebody within the business that's going to do that for you.
All right. So this is an excellent, Jessica. Thank you for transitioning so nicely into chapter 4. Well done, Jessica. But as we make that transition, I have a challenge for each and every one of you. This is something that I've taken on at Rockwell, and I'm challenging you to do the same thing. Propose to your leadership a purposeful time to have those forums, to bring those insights forward to leaders inside your organization so that they can get connected with the analysts. It's expressly designed to bring forward uncomfortable truths that they don't necessarily want to know that's going on inside their organization, so that they can take it and they can, at least hear about the story, and they can do something with it or not that will help you with diversity of thought, diversity of ideas and concepts that reach your senior leadership. It'll help your company and your engineers and analysts be more engaged. And I guarantee you, every company on the planet is fighting those struggles right now of how do you do those things. So this is I think this is a great idea for us to go forward and propose that at our companies. And if anyone has any success with that, I want to hear about that. Come back, leave comments, or like bring it back to the user group and let us know. So just a little challenge for you, because I proposed it and people went, wow, it does all these things that we don't know how to do. So that's great. So here, steal from me, because I stole that from you guys last week, or 2 weeks ago. So try that yourselves. All right. So we're going to move on to chapter 4. And chapter 4 is the anatomy of a data story, right? What is the data storytelling continuum? Hang on, let me just go right. Oh my, not my notes. Apparently I have lots of notes.
Okay, while you're doing that, can I just jump in and say, how cool was that Florence Nightingale came up with that visualization? I was stunned by that. That was amazing.
I had no idea, right? Yes. All right. So the anatomy of a data story, right? We want to hear, what are your number one insights? What are the things that was most useful for you inside of chapter 4? I'm going to start, and I'm going to talk about he kind of broke down, and he had a grid here about be more insightful, be more explanatory, be more concrete, finite, or curated. And then he talked about story framing and storytelling. And I think this is a perfect situation for what a lot of us do, which is we build a whole bunch of reports and content. But that in most cases is the framing aspect, right? It's not the storytelling, which is what you're talking about. And so again, I like to go to my drawing boards. So I went into Power BI. I said, okay, hey, if I was going to frame up a story, how would I do this so that it was if I was going to frame up the data, how would I do that so it's most useful to someone to implement and tell that story? And so that's when I came up with, especially with what they released yesterday with the ability to embed a Power BI page inside of PowerPoint, I created a story frame that's specifically designed for embedding within an expression within PowerPoint. So I customized the size of my canvas, right? So into canvas setting, I customized it to be just the size of the visual that I wanted to do. I then published it out into the service. And then, so you can see that there's no hocus pocus here. I took this And then I went into my presentation and I created a page specifically for that. And so I went into insert, add-ons, Microsoft Power BI. And if you don't have this already, you just have to download it. And then you just paste in the URL here and insert it. And now I have a visual that I can kind of put inside of my report here. Then I can make, this can be part of the data storytelling narrative, so that I've got a highly curated experience where I can go and say, aha, this is a visual, this is something I want to tell a story on, and I can build out an entire framework of visuals that would, allow my analysts to go and find the biggest insights that they want to key in on, and then all they have to do is have a myriad of slides out there, and then unhide or hide the slides that are corresponding to that visual, and then that's their curated story. So we take away the time and effort to do curation, or the time and effort around gathering and bringing it all together, and you just go into the curation, the selection, and then the storytelling narrative side of it. So that was that's why I was so excited about reading chapter 4 with the announcements yesterday. I kind of redid my whole thing I was going to do here. So, all right, awesome. For those,
I love your idea. I love your idea of resizing the report to fit in here better. So that there's a bonus material for everybody. Yep. Resizing your canvas. Thanks, Chris.
Well, because you paste a whole page, right? And if the page, it's too much because you want to have your slide, right? And you want to have your narrative and whatnot. So yeah, little tip for you there. So. All right. What were your favorite parts about chapter 4? How do you think you could use them inside of the real world or inside of your job? Raise your hands. Let's try and get some people to respond and come out and come up with some of these things. So, Greg, you're up.
So Chris, I didn't read that, but I did, since you were on the PowerPoint thing, I wanted to bring up since this is Power BI, like what you did, that is so sexy. And when they tried to market this up, what was the tagline? 2 minutes to wow. So what are they trying to do? Appeal to your emotional brain. And if you think about Marco and Alberto, being totally so to me, it points to a little bit with this crowd, a little bit of cognitive dissonance between, kind of being understood as business intelligence professionals. And when, this trying to, so it's just an interesting, PowerPoint, when Satya Nadella first said that Power BI is PowerPoint for data, I'm not sure how all that landed with the people who have made the deep dives into DAX and stuff.
But it really is. I mean, right? Look at how this all interacts and fits together, right? And frankly, if you think about your authoring experience and the number of capabilities that exist artistically or style-wise inside of PowerPoint, they crush Power BI. Honestly, I was kind of hoping we'd have an authoring experience inside of here, but, can't have everything. So, Kevin.
Yeah, I think we'll get there. The tagline, Greg, was 5 minutes to wow and not 2, so a little bit longer. Anyways, kind of back to that point, and if you go back to the visuals that you had just a second ago, that I loved this idea of story framing versus storytelling, and that is a little bit more exploratory, right? So when I looked at these two things, these graphics next to each other, what was on the left side, I in my mind turned into the information, the story framing side. And to Mike's point, I think it was Mike's point earlier, us as being, say Power BI professionals, report producing professionals, I think we sit on that story framing side a lot more, right? Which then leads to what Jessica was saying. Then getting that, working on that story framing, finding the different ways, like here you see he's got 4 visuals on it, but then helping the storyteller, which may be you, maybe somebody else, get down to what the 2 most important visuals are, and to get to the more side of the continuum, right? What is more insightful rather than informative? What is more concrete than abstract? But you got to go through both processes in order to really get there. So I love this section, and I think it does. For myself, it made me feel more comfortable that, yeah, I want to be able to tell stories, but I really sit more on the framing side more often. So, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin, you're exactly right. We need both sides of this, right? We need to have those frames, those pieces, that contextual report built out so that an analyst or someone can go in and understand the entirety of what's going on, right? It goes back to this first page, right? Like, I need to be able to go in and understand, what's happening here and agree that, whatever this is, Vigorous Exercise Company is the lead company, right? Or whoever, right? And I need to be able to go in and research it. But then when it comes time to, like, honing in on what is that visual, what is that message, having that frame together and, is incredibly important. And oh my gosh, maybe it's you have purposely built frames pages for places in your deck. Ooh.
Maybe,
right.
Maybe pages within there, right? And that's the starting point page that you're gonna put into your deck. But then when somebody says, how did you get here? Without leaving PowerPoint, you can navigate to the other pages, or if you notice, there's a little toolbar that says click, that it will then open up on the service or whatever. That one exactly, right? So, and to also get to the concrete part of it, this feature gives you a way to put it it doesn't have to be the live part of it, because what if it refreshes by the time you tell your story, you get a snapshot in there. And I haven't messed with it, but I'm assuming there's going to be other things to do. So yes, this feature, which I love this feature as much as you, I think plays to both sides of it and is really going to help convey messages out and get to the storytelling that we want to get to with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Just super excited about this. All right. Well, we are approaching the end of the hour. Anyone have any last insights for Chapter 4 of effective data storytelling?
Boy, we didn't even hit on so much that was there, right? Because I think the key attributes were in this chapter, right?
Yep. I also really like this comparison of news and nearly to story formats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is how you do news, and that's kind of what I was showing here on the visual theme, right? And I do this all the time for reports, but that is not a data story, right? Like, that does not get into the narration. That's not introducing it, right? We're not having rising action with climates and resolution. So, yeah, there's a lot in here that we could also go into and stuff. So,
yeah, and just going through these 6 elements here, I thought were wonderful. Getting into the sequencing, So yeah, for those listening, definitely get the book. We obviously in an hour can't do justice to each chapter or a half hour per chapter, but pulling out those key points, go through them. And I think there was a little matrix, if you keep going a little bit further, that's the matrix I was thinking about, where he ties them all together on where they're really used. I had to kind of study that. I still need to study it more and more. I thought it was a great thought process there. So,
well, don't zoom in this book. That doesn't. Apologies. All right. Before we go, not Jessica.
Jamila.
Nope. Julie. Washington.
Jamila. Hi.
Jamila.
Hi, everybody.
I'm sorry.
I go by Jai for short, so save yourself the headache. I just wanted to make sure I shared my thoughts here. And something that comes up for me in chapter 3 and 4 and in our discussions is a saying that I often say, and it's that knowledge cannot be given, it must be sought after. And I see our job as storytellers, and also how I see the tools that we use operating is providing a stimulus and inviting people in to the stories that we want to share. So I just want to leave you guys with that.
That gave me goosebumps. What a round of applause. That is exactly right. That is why we are here. I can't say it any more eloquently than that. Thank you so much for fighting through and making sure you got that out there, because I'm going to have to snip that on the live stream and share that with people. So thank you very much for that. And honestly, thank you guys all for coming back again. Sorry about last week. Getting the flu was no fun, but I am super excited to be back here again with you this week. I'm really looking forward to next week. Next week, we're just going to do one chapter, right? Because we're starting to really get in the heart of these chapters here. So there's a lot to talk about. And frankly, these discussion guides, there's a lot we can get into. We could probably do 4 hours here. We're going to do 1 hour a chapter next week. So they're out on my website on kraussbi.com. You can go and download these. So you can, and you can get them from effectivedatastorytelling.com. In fact, go get them from him. Register for his email. Let him know. So you stay in touch with everything that's going on here. But honestly, thank you guys all for being part of this. Thank you all for everyone who is at home for tuning in. And, we're going to be back here again next week. Thank you guys so much. You guys have a great day. Peace.